Hello. It is without a doubt that in this global world, education is regarded as a coveted luxury, offering a pipeline to a comfortable lifestyle. And while extremely valuable, it has created environments that prey upon the specific desire for success. Particularly in the US, the importance of education has been so indoctrinated in its citizens from as early as preschool that there is this ongoing belief that you won't find success outside of going to a well renowned university. Because of this societal pressure, many face this reliance on student loans to fund their educational journey, which to them paints a picturesque dream of prosperity. But this begs the question, if education is so significant in the American lens, why do students nationwide experience having to pay thousands of dollars as a last resort for success? The topic of canceling student loans isn't something that is new, but with the recent COVID-19 pandemic, followed by an economic downturn, it has resulted in the public's growing call for some form of economic relief. In his 2020 campaign for US presidency, President Joe Biden actually backed this legislative move, and now that he has officially won the president election, this topic is making its rounds once again as people want to see some significant change. The specific change would be within the settlement and compromise provision, which allows President Joe Biden executive authority to cancel student debt. It is important to mention that talks on student loan forgiveness initially started with the premise of cancellation up to $10,000 in debt, but recently that number has reached a possibility of $50,000 as some senators, including Elizabeth Warren, pushed this resolution onto the new Biden administration. To illustrate how exactly large the issue is, 45 millions of Americans owe a total amount of $1.7 trillion, with the average person having a debt of between $20,000 to $24,000. Studies show that student loans are the defining cause of people's delay in having kids, buying homes, even changing jobs, which further drag the economy. This becomes even more burdensome for black borrowers as they statistically display carrying more debt and struggling more to pay it off than their white counterparts. Ultimately, this particular discussion does not just encompass the realms of education, economics, and legal code, but it also embodies the many conversations that address racial justice, fairness, and politics. Now, with this in mind, we can start to address the main points on the debate of whether or not student debt should be canceled. With the cancellation of student debt, it can be very beneficial for black borrowers as it means it will be a nice step forward on no longer being disproportionately burdened by debt. In a comparison on the median student debt between white borrowers versus black borrowers, it was statistically found that the median student debt of white borrowers experienced a doubling from 12,000 to 23,000 between the years 2000 to 2018. Meanwhile, in that same time span, black borrowers' median student debt actually saw a quadrupling where their median student debt went from $7,000 to $30,000. This correlates to another study done by Brandeis University, which discovered that the average black borrower would have 95% of their debt still due even after 20 years of starting college, in contrast to white borrowers who would have already had paid off 94% of their debt. What these two studies show is that across the board, black students are negatively affected socioeconomically, and that student cancellation should work toward racial justice. In addition to this, cutting debt would give more mobility and actually create situations in which make people less financially liable. Harvard Business School examined what happened when students in default had their debt discharged as a result of a lawsuit. And interestingly enough, they noticed a trend where people's overall indebtedness shrunk by a quarter as well as became less likely to succumb to a default on other accounts. As explained by Harvard business professor Marco DiMaggio, these individuals essentially lowered their total liabilities, such as credit card debt, which improved their long term financial health. This improvement gave people the ability to have more financial freedom, translating into things like being able to change their jobs, making riskier investments which return positive incomes, and even moving across states. On the other side of the debate, however, it is argued that unemployment benefits and stimulus checks are better approaches to stimulating the economy. According to the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, they point out that canceling $1.7 trillion of student loans would produce only about $90 billion in advanced cash or in available cash in 2021 and only about $450 billion over the next 5 or so years. This is due to the fact that $10,000 of student loan forgiveness does not equate to giving borrowers um, that same amount in cash. This instead lets borrowers save that amount of equal value to their principal and interest payments. While this does not while this does result in several $100s in savings per month on average, the Congress would find a better way at giving Americans stimulus checks and promoting spending money as a way to stimulate the economy. Um, Not to mention, the erasure of student debt is only tackling one half of the equation. There would still need to be conversations in place which would confront the towering cost of higher education in America. What will happen the day after student loans are forgiven? Student loans is merely an immediate short-term relief. It does not end the loop of students feeling pressured to take student loans in order to fund their education. The underlying problem of high-cost education would need to see some relief by making college more affordable. By doing this, it deters any situations which cause students to be lured into debt produced by predatory institutions. Seeing the duality on this topic, it puts my perspective in favor of canceling student debt. Let's first dissect the pros of canceling student debt. While the inceptive goal was meant to be a restorative process for the economy, this discussion opened up the floor to a medium that could potentially address the vast racial gap. This recent year especially has highlighted how deeply and significantly Black Americans have been subjected to harsh, systemic, and systematic aggressions as a result of years of intolerance, racism, and injustice. We should be doing everything in our power to undo these extensive and rooted acts of violence every step we can. And on the topic of student loan forgiveness, giving people more mobility and becoming less financially liable, like I do see that argument being countered as the research based on it was founded in student loans being discharged as a result of a lawsuit rather than a normal situation. However, I think what needs to be in the spotlight is how it creates conditions for even more financial stability and growth. If people don't have to worry about tackling their debt and failing into the misfortune of poverty, people can move their focus onto creating financial abundance in practical ways for the long term. This can be instrumental for people of color as they don't have the advantage of having generations worth of wealth accumulated, unlike white Americans. It is also important to analyze the other side of the spectrum. Retrospectively, some argue that the cancellation of student debt won't be as impactful in restoring the economy in comparison to stimulus checks. The reason being is that it would be somewhat small-term near multiplier effect, in which means its effect on the economy would be very limited. However, Harvard professor Marco DiMaggio retorts this point by explaining that he estimates the multiplier effect to be $1 for every $1, which is a direct boost on the economy as it expands the US's GDP by billions and additionally decreases in unemployment. Not to mention, even if forgiveness wasn't the most efficient way to stimulate the economy, it is the most readily available move for the current Biden administration as it wouldn't need to go through the congressional process. And to some degree, the validity on the sentiment that canceling student debt does not address the overall problem within our higher educational systems is true, but it can still be the right step forward. We are merely in the early stages of seeing a transformation in our educational fields, even having this pandemic highlight how easily disruptive and grim their actions can deter students from seeing a positive learning experience. By seeing that something such as student debt can be canceled, it will prompt a conversation as to why there are high tuition costs set in the first place, and if so-called education is valued. There are so many global examples of higher education being affordable and well respected, and this will hopefully highlight the dichotomy between America's underlying capitalistic undertones and resulting socioeconomic struggle of educational institutions. To wrap this up, the US is in the midst of conquering a number of battles, from COVID-19 to a failing economy as a result. But with the cancellation of student debt, not only will it aid in the restoration of our markets, but it will also helpfully be a remedy not only for the collective financial prosperity, but to POCs and Black Americans specifically. So let's cancel student debt. Thank you.